Order at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland is absent. Tom Baylor.
Here.
Ken Jones.
Here.
Jeff Guard.
Here.
Melina Meyer.
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent. David Allison.
Here.
And David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay, so we have the work session topic for the 2020 budget, and I'm just going to turn it over to the city manager for the presentation on it.
Greetings, everyone. First and foremost, I want to make sure everyone is working off the same document that I am. I have put an amended general fund budget in the packet. It went on the, I guess, the website? No, it's
By email.
it got sent by email, so I just want to make sure everyone has it, but I will go through the one very significant change that will help everyone's conversation today in just a moment. First of all, I want to say that city staff has worked really, really hard. Every department head has worked with their staff to make sure that the budget that is presented to you is reflective of their needs. It's a different budget than what Alan presented a month ago. I think it's more refined and fine-tuned. And as you can tell by looking through this kind of overview document, that is a consolidated format to help us really focus on the conversation about what are we going to do to close the gap. So I'm hopeful that in the short amount of time we have, we can have a conversation about where the budget is and the kinds of cuts and or revenue sources that you council would like to pursue to make sure that this budget works. So on the highest level, what would be helpful for staff is to really get some direction. Are we looking at cuts? Are we looking at revenue possibilities? Are we looking at a combination of those things? And then we as staff will go back and work those numbers and make sure that when the budget is finally presented to you the next time we meet, we have solutions that will make it easy for this budget to pass. So with that in mind, as I said, this budget is a departure from how you've gotten them in the past rather than the 30 some odd pages of single line items. I really wanted to focus on our revenue, where we're at with those, and then the actual expenses that we anticipate in 2020. So we'll start with the revenue side. And I coming in as at the 11th hour here, I would have to say that I feel pretty strongly that this is a revenue problem, that there's got to be a way that we can look at increasing revenue, and there's many solutions that I know have been presented to me over the course of the last week or so, ideas that all of you have. But if you look at the general fund revenue for 2020 as compared to the fiscal year 19 budget that we're in right now, we're, $360 some odd thousand off of where we were last year. And we all kind of know what that number is. It's the state debt service reimbursement of $400 some odd thousand. Investment earnings and other things along those lines, we've got $187,000. And then
Pages of single line
that
items.
in taxes and other things, we're seeing modest increases on those areas. So bottom line is we really took a hit with the state debt reimbursement. And as it was presented by almost every community across the state who was looking at this, every community is faced with, what are we going to do about it? Heard a lot of talk about property tax raising and other things. And I know, as you all have shared with me, that there are other options for Cordova. On the expense side, I just want to be really clear that there are certain things we can look at and there are certain things we can't. We did just commit to a collective bargaining agreement that has had a pretty big impact on our bottom line, on the personnel costs. We have conversations with CCMC about how much they need from the city to make their operations work. The school district as well. and then the variables that come to play with raw fish tax and other things, how we might take a look at those as options. So I guess what I want you guys to do now is really have that open conversation and start a dialogue. Hopefully at the end of this, 50 minutes or so that we have left, you guys can come up with some real tangible ideas that we can pursue to close this gap. At this moment in time, we're looking at about a, $850,000 gap in the budget between revenue and expenses. So I'm going to throw it open to all of you. There were some documents that were provided. Susan put together a list of possible revenue options that had been discussed in the past. I'm sure there are others we could look at, but it's a document in your packet that will give you some ideas. And then, of course, you guys can look at the expense side too and give us some suggestions there. So I'm going to throw this you guys' way.
Okay, so is there anybody on the phone that wants to start off?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman or Mrs. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So I'm on the raw fish tax in particular, since we got 1.233 on that 1.23 million instead of the budgeted $1,050,000 on arguably one of the worst years ever. I think that we would be completely safe to change our budget number for 2020 up to at least 1.3 million and maybe 1.4. And that would close, because we had a good year this year, and there's just no way we're going to have less than that 1.23 come in. So that was one thing that really stood out to me. So, and I'm sure everybody caught that. And then the other thing I like is Ann's idea of that EMS fee, because I think we could implement that pretty quickly, and it's totally justifiable because, like she said, the FAA and the ADF&G and all these exempt places, if their place was on fire, the fire department would come there and put it out. If they needed police assistance, the police would come there and help them out, and they don't pay any property taxes or anything. So I like those two items in particular, and I think that we could implement that fee on the utility bill, the water, sewer, and garbage bill, and it'd just be like, whatever number we come up with. But I think Susan put it at $10 a month and came up with a pretty good number there. So those are two things I liked.
Okay, anyone else on the phone before we go to the room?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, this is Allison.
Go ahead.
A couple of questions first. Is other governmental, the Raw Fish USFS, is that where, do we have forest receipts in there?
All receipts in that area, yes.
So the forest receipts that have not been authorized yet by the federal government are included?
Yes, it's my understanding they're, I'm not sure what the authorization timeline is on that, but they are included.
Okay. I don't agree with that at this point in time because it hasn't been authorized. It may be, but it hasn't been. So I don't think we can include it in our budget, but I'm only one vote. The other thing was, you said there was a major change. I don't have the change in front of me because I just have my phone and I don't have that in there. But what is the street maintenance?
Sure, thank you. I'm sorry, I should have clarified that for those of you. Street maintenance, the 2020 budget should have been 902,137, which is a difference of 28,000 from last year. So the bottom
Okay,
line.
an extra 2 got in there
Yeah,
somehow.
yep, it got an extra 2 in there. So the bottom line problem is about 842,000 and change.
Okay, that said, I don't disagree with the council member prior to me, Mr. Gleason's analysis on those 2 things. I would also like to look at the which one was it? The surtax for alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. And I'm interested in that. I'm not interested in very much in the sales tax increase or the local raw fish tax yet at this point. I might be willing to talk about that at some point in time. I would like to discuss taking this year's additional payments for the bond debt reimbursement, taking that out of the permanent fund. But I would also like to maybe look at some of these other things, maybe wharfage or the motor fuel tax, and offset property tax with that. I guess where I'm going with that is if we don't have to set the mill rate until later on, and if we don't take it out of the permanent fund, it's pretty much got to be a a 2 mil property tax increase. But if we can offset that with some other wharfage or motor fuel tax and say that that's what it is, we're either going to raise the mill rate or we're going to have this wharfage to make up what the state took away from us on the bond debt reimbursement. Then we still got some time to, I guess, hope and politic that they add that back in this year. Not likely, but it's worth a shot at anyway. So I'm not much interested in too many, tax increases myself. I think we need to make some cuts. I would prefer to. I think the schools is okay there. However, I think the first half is going to have to be, what did we say, Susan, $1,040,000 or something like that, and that would make the second half only 700 and some thousand, and then we're stuck with another $1 million next year on that. So we kind of eat it on one end or the other because we committed to so much for their fiscal year that we're currently in, which is the first 6 months of the year next year. So for us, anyway, those are my beginning thoughts on it. Anyway, go from there.
Councilman Jones, do you have something before we go to the room?
Yeah. So I guess one thing I'd like to bring up is we already did the 0.5% raw fish tax. That's done. It's going to pay for the harbor bond, and same with the wharfage, I believe. So the motor vehicle fuel tax was turned down by voters, and I would not like to see us go for that again. Same with raising the tax cap. That was turned down by voters, and I'm not interested in going against what the public wants. As far as property tax increase, we already did that this year too, by keeping the mill rate the same, but everybody's assessments went up 10%. So like to avoid that if possible. I could possibly be in favor of raising the sales tax. And I wouldn't want to see us raise the fish tax line item to any greater than our 10-year average. I think that would be short-sighted to raise that up when it's so, we don't know what it's going to be, and it varies from year to year so much. Yeah, gill netting was bad in 2018, but seining was good, and we had bonuses that came from a huge sink season in 2017. So this year we saw fish prices go down for the seine fleet, which is the majority of that fish tax number comes from pinks. And we also, local canneries lost all the cost recovery. So I don't think it's going to be much higher than it was this year. If at all, it could possibly be lower. And the state's already tried to take that from communities. I don't think they're going to try it again, but they did this spring. And so I think that would be not a great idea just to raise that up. We might be able to raise it a little bit, but I wouldn't want to go over what our 10-year average is.
This is Helen. I just want to make a comment. We did a little bit of research on the tax implications, you know, the tax hit that local people have to pay. And it was kind of interesting. Agnew Beck actually did most of the research, and that between 2010 and 2017, there's only been $25 difference. It's less than 1% in the average per capita tax impact of property and sales tax. I know there's been increases. I know a variety of things have happened, but we're well below the CPI index increases between 2011 and 2019. It went from $1 in purchasing power equals $1.14 in purchasing power now. And we're basically flat across the board from 2010 to 2017 in terms of the cost per person of the taxes that we put on folks either through property or sales tax. So I just wanted you guys to know that that's not an undue burden that we are putting on our citizens. And it's just a point of reference as you guys have this conversation.
Does that take into account fish taxes that aren't necessarily on citizens, but are on, you know, fish landed, and it doesn't also take
No, it's strictly property and
Right.
sales tax. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't take into consideration the amount that our values have gone up in the last 10 years. I think we've gained $10 million of real property assessment.
Well, it actually does, because it takes the population and divides it by the value of the properties in the let's say in 2010, and comes up with a number. And then it takes the value of the properties in 2017 and divides it by the number of people. Even if the number has gone up, the average on a per capita basis. And granted, some people have got 10 kids and, you know, they're all counted. But I'm just saying that in terms of the actual cost per capita, we have not endured or seen a huge increase in that cost.
Could you email me that information?
Sure,
'Cause
sure.
But,
I'm sorry, who's talking? Because I'm Ken. Okay.
oh, all right. This is Ken Jones. I'm on
Okay, great. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, now we'll go around the room and ask questions. I think Councilman Baylor had his hand raised.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to that statement too, because I know I'm paying a lot more in property tax than I did 10 years ago. I guess can you hear me?
Oh, was that not on?
Number 3.
Can you hear me on the phone now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
It says it's on.
So I guess I'm still looking for answers on some of our costs that we talked about before, such as clerk's department, $16,700, information services, $78,000, the DMV, $29,000. I think last time we talked about this was an $18,000 bump. Now it's $29,000. So I do see law enforcement actually went down. They limited the officers. So is there some room there? I tend to look at, in my opinion, I think there's still room for one more cut in staff in City Hall. And the other thing is the non-exempt people, maybe it's time that they help share the burden of the healthcare cost. It's kind of unheard of today that you would get free healthcare. So those are some of the things that I have questions about.
Would you like us to address those now, or would the group like to wait to the end? I'm happy to to jump in.
You want to go first?
No, I mean, if we keep piling up questions, we're probably gonna have stuff fall
Okay.
through the cracks.
Okay, great. So first and foremost, I think all of us have had the same questions about personnel. And again, my memo talks a little bit about, we did have an increase based on the new collective bargaining agreement that was signed, that went into effect. So there's some automatic increases to the budget. We also, and I'm going to turn this over to Cindy, because as our human resources person, she can explain this a little better. But in a nutshell, as I understand it, we allocate bodies across departments. So for instance, if in law enforcement, the DMV, whomever is occupying that role, might also have their salaries moved into dispatch or whatever, and vice versa. So I'm going to let Cindy address that. And then in terms of information services, there were some changes in personnel that happened with the departure of Kathy, and then there were some positions that were realigned and new positions created that bumped that the museum and library budgets anyway. And again, I'm going to let Cindy address those directly. You want to come?
Oh, you need to come up to a mic so the people on the phone.
I know. I was kind of okay. I'm bored. Okay. So, Tom, you may have to repeat some of your questions, but I guess I'll start off with the police. I made some I did some research to look back at the history of how, let's just start with the police department, how they've been funded. And so in 2020, we have one chief. We did drop an officer. We had originally budgeted, Alan had originally budgeted for 5. We put it in 4 officers. And we have 1 leader and 5 dispatchers. In 2019, we had 1 chief, but we only budgeted for 4 officers originally when Alan presented that budget in December of 2018. But because we didn't put anything in Public Works Director when Rich left, Dean, we did the budget amendment and we took $75,000 from the police, which basically reduced our officers budgeted as 3.25 FTE for officers. And again, we had 5 dispatchers. Now, I had recalled for 2018, 2017, and 2016, we were used to and had budgeted and had filled 1 chief, 5 officers, 1 leader, and 4 dispatchers. So it's been a staffing change, and in my history, a lot of it I've seen is, different councils sometimes want the police department to be covered differently. Some want maybe more officers, some want less. I mean, that has been probably one of the departments that has changed as far as officers being budgeted and dispatchers being budgeted throughout the years, from my institutional knowledge. The dispatchers, like Helen said, when we break it out into law enforcement and jail and DMV, traditionally the chief is always budgeted at 70-20-10, and the police officers are budgeted at 80 law and 20 jail. The dispatchers, we did something different a year ago with noticing that one of our dispatchers is pretty much DMV. She will cover for some dispatch when needed if someone's on vacation or sick. So that's, and short of, I guess, drawing a picture or doing an Allen thing and going up to the board, which I don't want to do, and there's not enough people wouldn't be able to see it. But we changed that. And so instead of dispatch, the majority of them, the other 3 are like 70-20-10, but the leader is budgeted, we changed it to 64% law, 18% jail, and 18 DMV. But with Davina, who mainly does DMV, we lowered her allocation to law and raised it to DMV. So she's actually allocated, her salary is actually allocated as 40% to law, 13% to jail, and 47% to DMV. So this is really just a correction. It looks like, you know, something happened big there, but it's just a change in allocation. And I'm happy if any of you want to come in and look at my spreadsheets or look at, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions in particular and let you look at the figures, because I know that can be, you know, hard when we just verbalize it. Okay, what was your other question, Tom? Oh, info services?
Well, let's just, so,
Okay.
if you wouldn't mind, so we've got just did a little math there, we got a $45,694 bump, not including the law enforcement. You
Okay,
got
where-
29,184 and you got 16,510. So I don't know, doesn't matter to me how many people there are and where they're working or that sort of thing. I guess for me is, why are we bumping up $45,694?
Where are you seeing that? What are you looking at? I want to make sure I'm looking at the
Yeah,
same.
I'm not counting I
I'm
understand.
not counting police,
I
okay.
understand the police, right? I mean, you're going to have 4 officers, I'm not debating that, but you've got these other costs, and it doesn't matter to me, maybe I understand, I don't care if they're dispatch or DMV, the bottom line is that we still got an over $45,000 bump up there.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Tom, what are you looking at?
He's looking at,
I'm looking
At
at,
the DMV budget strictly.
oh, you're looking at the one you handed out tonight?
yep. So he's looking at,
Copy of
Is
Well-
dispatch part of law enforcement or
Yes.
fire
Yes.
EMS?
it. Cindy,
I thought I had one.
you do, you just left.
Tom, I think the amount that you got was from fire, EMS, disaster management plus DMV, right? Was that the 40?
Yes,
Yeah, so the dispatch is under law enforcement, not fire. Yes.
there was, as I say, a fairly significant impact. It turns out to be about 1.6, 1.5, what is it, when, for every dollar we spend for a salary increase, with it fully loaded with
All the benefits.
all the benefits, it's about 1.5, right? 1.55?
Oh, the percentage,
Yeah.
and the fringe benefits, yes, and that can vary with your health insurance, what coverage you're getting.
Right. So the bottom line is when we did this new collective bargaining agreement and we increased salaries, it also comes with the cost of benefits, which is about half again as much as the dollar you will spend on the salary increase.
So with the 2% raise, it was more like 3%,
Yep.
the benefits.
Yeah,
With
the
benefits.
with the CBA, the 2% was every year, and then with the step schedule being changed to folks getting a step increase every year, that's almost 5%. So it's a 7%. So when that
7 plus another 0.5% of.
Correct.
I mean,
Right,
half
that
again,
trickles
so-
over,
so
right.
It's 10 and a half.
Correct. It grows when you look at gross wages, and it's easy to figure that percentage, but then when you call it, load it with all the fringe benefits, of course, it's gonna be bigger.
I mean, but bottom line, if you looked at that initial memo, personnel costs are going up by $427,000 for fiscal year 2020.
Correct.
So that, just for that one department, it cost us almost $46,000. And we didn't add anybody, we're at the same amount of people, it's just the new contract added that much just to that department. That's
And you're-
part of that $400,000.
Yeah, and Tom, are you talking about the police department? Because we did drop an officer.
No,
and we-
I'm talking.
He's just talking about those two. And keep in mind, these are not just personnel. This is loaded with everything. It's the cost of equipment, perishables, whatever it is. It's not just people. So, and I can show you those numbers.
Yeah, I can only speak to the personnel part.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
All right, thank you. And then, so, what information services, we lose a person, but we're paying more money.
We grew, we did
Does that make sense?
the information services grew a 0.7 of a person. They had 7 FTE, and now I think they're like 7.7. So we had Kathy, who resigned, and we promoted within. So 2 existing employees kind of took over her duties. And then in place of that, then they added a part-time, and actually it's like, that's where it gets kind of an odd amount to the museum and library. So there's an extra position there. I have it at, yeah, it was it's now 7.7 people, so it did grow by 0.7. And what we've always done with information services is because she's got, the majority of her people are part-time. There's only 4 full-time. And then all the others are part-time. So what we do is we adjust the hours. So that 0.7 person is working, more than half time. It's, like I said, I can show you, Tom, I'm happy to show you this. And like I said, it might be this is the case where if you saw what I'm looking at here, that might help understand, kind of where you're going.
But these positions have been filled. And
Except for one, in the museum, there is still one position that's vacant, and, it's at 1640 hours in the year. 2080 is full-time, so it's more than, it's your 0.7 person, a 3/4 person. Does that help you? Or does that?
Staffing is up to the city manager, so I hope you'll take a look at that. It doesn't, I don't know how we lose a person and end up paying more.
Well,
And I guess the other comment that I had was and I guess maybe that's for discussion later, is for the exempt staff to also help pay for health insurance, which would help offset some of these other costs.
sure.
recognizing that there are some exempt staff that haven't had a step increase in 4 years, just to advocate for that, and have missed out on a couple of COLAs that were normally given. The entire tenure for the last period, exempts did not get, except for the ones that were promoted or filled other positions, or, were assigned more duties. There are a number of us that haven't had a step increase in 4 years. So that's, when you have union employees at 5% every year, well, and exempts have not had anything in 4 years. Just forgive me if that was out of line, but I had to throw that in there just in case you didn't know. Anything else? I'm happy to answer. Or,
We're good. Thanks, Cindy.
okay.
Jeff, you want to take your turn at it?
A couple quick questions here. So where's the hospital at in this?
They're in the interfund transfers, other government, no, that's income, sorry. We're in the transfers to other entities at the bottom of the page.
Which page are you?
The second page, there's the cover sheet that says City of Cordova, and if you flip it to the back, the second page, there's the totals section at the very bottom, and about 4 lines up from that, or 3 lines, you'll see transfers to other entities. And right now, those transfers are budgeted at $2.954 million. Last year, it was $2.63 million. And there's a $323,000 difference. And on the front page of my memo, it outlines what those are. Cordova School District was $1.75 million in cash, plus the $156 in kind. $900,000 to CCMC, Chamber of Commerce $90,000 with a $28,000 in kind, Community Resource Center $20,000, and the Community College $10,000. I did meet with the school district superintendent, and he confirmed that 1.75 looked like a good number. I know they had asked for $200,000 more this year. I believe the agreement was signed in May or so. And that $200,000 was used to help with some cash flow issues. They've got that in reserves now. That number is not in the request this calendar year coming up. And then obviously the number that I was given for CCMC at 900,000 is the request. Those are all numbers that are subject to your action, so.
Okay. Guess if I would have read the other page, I could have had those answers without having to ask them.
It's okay.
So, and I don't think it's not important to sit there and grind some numbers like you're doing, Tom. But I think at this point in time, our overall gap number is big enough. We need to kind of make some policy decisions here on generally how we're looking at going. Are we looking at ravens and revenues? Are we looking at, taking chunks out of the permanent fund? Or are we looking at slashing stuff? If we're looking at slashing stuff with where we've been cut, basically we really haven't come back up from where we were when we first got Ellen here, and he had to cut the budget drastically. I mean, we've had expenses go up. We really haven't increased any money for maintenance operations or any of that kind of stuff. So if we're wanting to cut, I mean, it's not going to be 5% here or 10% there or that stuff. It's going to be carving off a leg and getting rid of sections or departments. So that's kind of where I'm thinking this talk needs to go tonight. As far as I can get on board with the public safety fee. The syntax is when the surcharge at 6% or whatever level we picked there. But that's, 290,000, we'll call it 300,000 for round numbers. We're still $500,000 in the hole. Better than $500,000 in the hole there. So I don't know where this is all going to get us. I mean, it looks like to me that we are going to have to do some kind of withdrawal from the permanent fund here. And I guess if you want to pick a number to do that, a lot of that money that went in there was from timber sales that had to do with schools. So if we're looking at doing that, the shortages, we're looking for bond debt reimbursement from the state. We could realistically go pull that out of the permanent fund. So that's another 400 and some K there. So we're still looking at another 150,000 or 200,000 we're going to be short. We had talked at one point about moving from a sales tax to, and I may be using the wrong term for this, but was it a gross receipts tax or?
Yeah.
That, to where some of the other, we talked about the public safety fee charge being able to put some of the burden on some of the other entities in town that really don't pay that when we call them a tax or that. So if we did a gross receipts deal, we could then be capturing some of the dollars for tax exempt entities in town, like the Forest Service or Fish and Game or whoever. But sectors we're having to supply services for that we're not getting paid for. So I don't know how long a process that is to do something like that. I don't know that it's been done a lot. There's probably quite a little bit of legal legwork to do with it. So if anybody knows more about that, feel free to speak now.
That's why I got left off of that list,
Okay.
because I didn't know how to put it in place or how long it would take even. But you're right, I would say a little bit of legal legwork. So if that becomes the will of the body, we need to know like last week so we can get started on it. But it's not anything we can't look into.
I don't think that would be a solution for this budget, but I do think that it would be worth looking into for the future. I just don't I agree with it taking extensive legwork and, legal work, so. I don't think with it November already that it's gonna solve our problem for this coming fiscal year.
And I appreciate, this is Helen, I appreciate that notion right now because I firmly believe that I can find revenue, grant revenue to support some of the projects that the city has decided were a priority. And there probably are other things that I don't even know about that I'd be more than happy to research and try to make happen, but we are in the 11th hour. So I think, you know, we look at the low-hanging fruit right now with the notion that we're looking for a more permanent, more realistic solution for the 2021 budget, if not the second half of 2020, because sometimes it takes time to get things set in play. So that's another thing that I just want to throw out there is that it is a revenue problem, it's an income problem, and there are other ways of making that happen. But again, we're out of time in some instances.
So, one other thing that we could do that would about close the gap between our 842 and reality, if we took the shortages for the bond debt reimbursement from the state out and took those out of the permanent fund, and we did the $10 a month public safety fee, the sin taxes, and then we did a 0.5% sales tax increase, that would about have us on our number. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but those are my 2 cents.
At the end of the day, what would be really great is if there was any kind of consensus thinking around even 5 or 6, which we could explore and bring back numbers to demonstrate how, A, how they would be implemented, B, how much money it would raise, and actually we could get that to you really quickly. And my understanding from Susan is that next week we have a meeting with the school board, and potentially we could convene a quick work session with the information that you guys would want from us as staff to make sure that you were informed as you went ahead.
Like if we did an hour with the school, 6 to 7, and then came over here and did an hour, another budget work session a week from today.
And I could commit to getting the information that you need.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and run through my thoughts on the budget. The timber receipts that are included on there, I know that's a big portion of that. I kind of think of that as it's about the same as the school debt reimbursement that we're losing. So if we can try to come up with the balancing this budget, then if the timber receipts don't come in, then we can talk about going into the permanent fund to get out that amount. So I know Allison talked about how he didn't like the timber receipts in this budget because they haven't been allocated for right now. I think just for planning purposes, I'm okay with them being in the budget, just as long as we're aware that they might not come in and we might have to go into our permanent fund to fill that gap. Personnel costs, those went up, so I don't think that there's much we can do right now, so I'm not gonna go through and talk about it. I agree with Tom that we lost a director, hired some more people, raised them, and it ends up costing us more money is kind of a hard pill to swallow. You would think that raising some rates and raising some wages would help save some costs rather than filling a director position, but what's done is done. Don't like the idea of raising sales tax, but if we raised it 1%, that would be $500,000. Property tax, if we raise that 100,000, and then raise the raw fish line item by 100,000, and then did across the board 100,000 cut would be that 850 that we're down. So that was kind of the line, where I'm at, where I would be okay with to get this budget balanced. And then with the sales tax increase, I would really like to spend the next year looking at gross receipts tax. And I don't think that any other community has done a gross receipts tax. So I think we would be kind of doing it. We'd be a first. So I think there'd be a lot of work that needs to go into how that would work and implement. So I think we should seriously look at that if we're going to be raising sales tax. Maybe that's a better way to go rather than doing sales tax or have a really low sales tax and have it mainly be gross receipts. So that's kind of where I'm at. So we have another about 15 minutes. Do we want to go around, Mr. Baylor, and then
Yeah,
go on the phone?
just one more question, and I think we've talked about this before, about cleaning up all the exemptions. I don't know what kind of impact that has on our finance coming in, but, you know, we have bed and breakfasts and others that are, so I think that should also be on the table to clean that up.
Exemptions for all taxes?
Yeah, there's a lot of,
Okay.
you know, exemptions out there. I don't know what the number is, but we've looked at it before and then we've backed off it, and I don't know where we're at on that. And maybe it was done while I was off council, I don't know.
We looked at it once while you were off council, and we ran the numbers on what we could make if we got rid of each of the exemptions. And it was a number, but it was really pretty small, and a lot of work to get a small number out of it.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean that we can't clean that up, but all these things aren't getting us towards, you know, any place near the big numbers we need to be looking at to
Yeah, well,
balance the budget this year. And I mean, they're
Yeah.
all good things, and we all, it's our job to take care of that, but we're running out of time here.
I'm going to quote Mr. Allison, I believe he said it, you know, it's peanuts, but if you get enough peanuts, you can feed the elephant. So every little bit helps, and before I tax somebody, I want to make sure that we're treating everybody fair. But
Yep.
it may not be worth it. I wasn't in that discussion, so.
I'm all in favor of cleaning up the exemptions.
Anyone on the phone?
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Jones.
So I have a question, I guess for Helen, and that would be how many positions in this budget for each of these departments that we see increases proposed? How many positions are still unfilled? Is it something that we could do just to not fill these positions and save, or some of these positions and save some of this $500,000?
I think all we're talking about are 2 police officers, and Cindy, I'm going to ask, and then the 1.7 time position in information services is my understanding, right? And 1 firefighter medic. So we're looking at 3 positions in fire police. And I will say that from what I've been led to believe that those 2 positions in the police department are really critical to making sure that we have coverage that we need to take care of the airport contract and other kind of commitments that we have for public safety. So I would need to talk with Hicks about that. But I think right now, given that Chief Hicks is planning on retiring out here in in spring, we will have a vacancy there. And then we have 2 officers, and my understanding is that they've been putting in hundreds of hours of overtime, either paid or unpaid, because they're just short on officers. So I'm relatively new to this whole process. We haven't done any kind of hourly assessment of how people are spending their time, and perhaps that's something we could look at in terms of rearranging and reorganizing staff. But right now, the budget as it stands is pretty tight, with the exception of the information services, the 2 police officers, and the 1 fire EMT.
Okay, thank you. I do think it would be worth looking into where we can save on that end. There's a pretty significant increase from the latest collective bargaining agreement, and I think that it's only fair to evaluate
Sure.
our personnel needs moving forward.
Gar, did you have your hand up before, Baylor?
Just one quick thing, as long as we're on law enforcement. I don't know that we have time to do it now and still get this budget done. But I'd like to have us sit down and look at what our needs really are for coverage for law enforcement. I know when I first came to town, we had 3 officers here in town, and I think we probably had a higher crime rate then. I know we certainly had a higher violent crime rate than we have now, with a number of more drinking establishments that we used to have than we do now. But we've had trouble recruiting for these. We've been trying to keep 24-hour-a-day coverage with a pared-down number of folks. If we can do it with a pared-down number of folks and go to 16 hours a day coverage with some on-call stuff after that, maybe we won't have the burnout problem that we've been having and keeping officers. I don't know.
It's definitely something I can discuss with the chief, and also we'll definitely have an opportunity to really evaluate this in the new year. And I'm committed to doing that because I think there's some efficiencies that we can gain. And people will be happier if they're not doing jobs that either they weren't hired to do, or, you know, I always call them Frankenstein jobs where, you know, just by attrition or whatever, you get handed all these little pieces and parts and pretty soon you don't know what you're doing. I think there's some opportunities to really look at that and make everybody happier.
Okay, before we go to Baylor, we have about 9 minutes left. So what we can do is if someone wants to make a motion to recess, we can continue this after the regular meeting. So just putting that out there too. If you guys have more questions, we can continue afterwards.
I guess the
Councilman
one thing
Baylor?
I was going to throw out is, unless somebody's got something they want to bring in, it was always frustrating to me when I attended these as in an audience that they're talking about maybe taxing my establishment and other things. We do have some people in the audience. We got a few minutes. If we could take any quick public comment, it might help us.
Okay,
If you guys are up for that.
I'm open for that. I just had one quick question for Helen. How much do we get reimbursed for the DMV from the state?
60,000.
Okay, so it's costing the city $40,000 to operate our DMV.
Yeah, and I think what Cindy was describing, and that's something that we're going to have a real serious conversation about, is how do we allocate to these different departments? Because if in actuality that DMV person is working for the 60,000 that we get, but their time is being also used in other places, or vice versa, you know, maybe this allocation isn't really what it is. If we're spending $140,000 of staff time to run a $60,000 DMV contract, there's a problem, and we need to look at that. So,
Yeah, that was just my question, how much
Yeah.
we're getting reimbursed for.
yeah.
All right, so we'll take the next 8 minutes. Anybody in the audience wants to come up and talk about some of these taxes we've been discussing?
Greg Meyer, 1 Cannery Row, and reluctant fisherman hat. If you do increase the sales tax, the surtax, bed tax goes up with it. So that would be a 14% tax on our guests coming to Cordova. And if we do an alcohol tax, that's 6% in the bar and restaurant, and 20% tip, that's 26%, 27%, whatever you guys do. Just, you know, we want visitors to keep coming, and if we just keep taxing them, they might stay away. So, just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Hey, Mark Freifel, Shoreside Petroleum, 100 Ocean Dock Road. I have some, just a couple numbers for the planning and the council for tonight. As far as wharfage, we can call that a tariff that we currently pay on every gallon of fuel that comes in. I saw that there was an additional 3 cents a gallon tariff that you wanted to add, item 8. in addition to the 3 cents that we are already collecting for the new harbor improvements. So currently, the city, through this last barge of October 30th, it's 164,396,000 that we've collected for the tariffs on that for the harbor and for the city. City sales tax, second quarter 2019, Shoreside collected an additional 50,000 in 2019 that will show up or has already shown up on there. So roughly, 590,000 in city sales tax from Shoreside should be something that's close to what's expected for 2019. So when we add these additional taxes, the motor fuel tax and the wharfage tax, it makes us less competitive. I keep talking about that, trying to get it through to everybody on what that means to us. And what that means to us is those gallons go away, the customers go away. I saw 2 companies from Cordova companies specifically, that have left and bought majority of their fuel in Whittier this year. So one of them that most of the people on city council are on their board left, and they purchased roughly 130,000 gallons of fuel at a value of about $410,000 in Whittier. So that's money that you drive out of Cordova. That's a Cordova business that leaves, and they buy their goods and services other places. So with that, be aware of those things. When we make it harder to do business in Cordova, it makes it harder to do business in Cordova.
Do you have any thoughts about some, or ideas that we might have not considered, or that you think might be a direction you'd like to see us look?
Well, we need to build business in Cordova, and we don't need to make it easier for people to go away from Cordova. Unfortunately, we have to run the Cordova city as a business, and with that, there's cuts and there's additional incomes that we have to generate. How do you generate those across the board instead of just hitting the easy button with one company? You do that with a sales tax increase. You do that with the surtax on the alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, maybe. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why you guys make all the big bucks. So I want to make it clear that we are driving businesses out of Cordova. Cordova businesses that are here are going elsewhere to purchase their goods and services because it's cheaper. So let's just be aware of that.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience? All right, thank you guys for speaking with us. And any other council members, you guys want to go around again real quick? Got a couple minutes, last thoughts?
You were looking to postpone meeting?
If that's
Not a bad idea.
Recess?
if somebody wants to make the motion to recess, then
Second.
Move to recess.
motion and second, we vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Until after the regular meeting, is that
Yeah.
correct?